Nick Killer in the chat, one of our great members. It is Siakam versus OG in the Eastern Conference Finals. Siakam of the Indiana Pacers playing very, very well. Was an All-Star this season. Probably has a case to make All-NBA. Three-time All-Star. If he makes All-NBA, it'll be the third time in his career he will have made an All-NBA team as well. So, pretty damn good for a guy who was scapegoated quite heavily by a lot of this Raptors fan base. On the side of OG Anunoby, Raptors fans knew it all along how good this guy was, but it took a trade to a big American market to know just how impactful OG Anunoby is on winning, especially on the defensive end, but the shooting that comes with it as well. Two very, very good players that the Toronto Raptors decided to move on from. So we're going to take a look back at those trades and kind of wonder if the Raptors had made the right decision. Would they go back and undo those trades, kind of knowing where they are with their team currently? So, first of all, Pascal Siakam. I think this one's a little bit easier because it was tough. You kind of had this battle, not like an actual battle, but the year Pascal Siakam got traded was the real emergence of Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes was an all-star that season. I think it helped playing next to Pascal Siakam to get that all-star berth because they played really well with each other. Contrary to the loud opinions of people, they were great together. They got along really well, and as much as you'd think their play styles didn't mesh, they did. They played really well off of one another, and you saw Barnes made an all-star team out of it. But it felt a lot like in the early stages of that season that Siakam was being misused and underutilized overall by the Raptors. But it was definitely a conversation that needed to be had if Siakam, because that was a contract year for Siakam, there definitely was a conversation that needed to be had in regards to Siakam being worthy of the max contract at the end of the season. That was a tough one because I think it was Siakam had made it clear he wanted to stay. Basically, the caveat was, okay, you got to pay him a max contract. Are you ready to do that? Do you believe in this core? And I don't think the Raptors fan base was necessarily upset when it was a decision to pivot towards rebuilding when they traded Siakam. They got the salary of Bruce Brown and 3 first-round picks for it. Not the greatest of first-round picks either. It was 2 very late first-round picks and a Pacers middle of the pack sort of pick. Trying to remember exactly what those picks were. It was Pacers pick that year, and it was a late first that year. And it was a 2026 Pacers pick. That's what it was. Pacers pick for that year, 2024. Late first for that year. Ended up being the 29th overall pick and a 2026 Pacers pick. So not really a lot out of that, but fans understood why the trade was made, thinking it was a rebuilding move. Now, since then, Siakam has thrived with Indiana. Very happy for him. Still a massive Pascal Siakam member. The Raptors have pivoted quite well off that trade. They basically turned the assets from that trade into Brandon Ingram, Ochai Agbaji, and the pick became Jacoby Walter, who I don't like looking at it through that lens, but for just the ease of this conversation, let's look at it through the lens of the player we got from the draft pick. Because they used that late first to get Agbaji and Olynyk's gone, who in the trade that got Brandon Ingram. So essentially, they traded Pascal Siakam for Brandon Ingram for Ochai Agbaji, who was great last year, and for Jacoby Walter, who looks like a very promising young player. So ultimately, I think that trade worked out. I think you got more value out of Siakam than you maybe would have had you kept him, because you got those 2 additional players. Brandon Ingram, I don't think, is as good as Pascal Siakam, but complicated situation with the expiring contract. Now, you could argue they should have traded Siakam earlier when he was worth more. Sure, I think they did a pretty good job out of that trade in the end. The OG Anunoby trade, I'm not really sure I'm going to look back and say did a good job there. Because at the time, it looked great. And RJ Barrett's been great for the Raptors. And Quickly's been Been when he's healthy, he's been great. But overall, he's been fine for the Raptors. You also got the 31st overall pick in that trade, which became Jonathan Mobo. You got rid of Flynn and Chua, who are worthless, pretty much. Like whatever, don't care about them, respectfully. But that Siakam trade is like a rebuilding type of trade. But that OG Anunoby trade kind of showcased a lack of patience for a rebuild from the Raptors. Like, that was a team that wanted to start winning pretty quickly, it seemed. That's why they didn't want picks. They had turned down, the 3 first-round picks type of offer for OG. They wanted players. They wanted to be good again quickly. And I think in knowing that, I do think it's kind of tough to say, but looking back on that OG trade and how impactful he is on winning, you kind of look back on that trade and think, man, that might have been one you wanted to keep. Like, that's the type of player everyone's looking for. And I said at the time, when in the conversations around trading OG, if you trade away OG Anunoby, you're just going to spend the next 5 years trying to find another OG Anunoby. Because everyone is looking for that elite defender who can shoot threes very efficiently. So, at the time, yeah, and I think Barrett's great. I think Quickly's great. But in terms of winning and being a playoff team, does maybe OG Anunoby provide more value to that? I think he does. So that's tough. Right now, I kind of look at it that way. If Quickly really kicks on for the Raptors, if Barrett really kicks on for the Raptors, then maybe this conversation shifts again and we go back to thinking, okay, the Knicks got better immediately. The Raptors took a little bit more time, but they got there with those players. So that makes it a little bit more tough. But presently, the Raptors did pretty well with the Siakam trade. They did okay with the OG trade, but like if you wanted to win this quickly, I guess it gave the Raptors the opportunity to tank in 2 consecutive drafts. They didn't get to use that pick in one of them, but it gave them the 9th pick here. And maybe they would have thought they could have gotten better than the 9th pick, but they also started this season with the intention of making the playoffs if they were good enough to do it. So there was never really a clear desire to tank and rebuild and let that process play out for the Raptors. So going back and knowing that there wasn't ever really going to be a prolonged rebuild for the Raptors, I wonder if you could go back and think, okay, if that's going to be the process, then why not stick it out with this group? You're missing a quality point guard. You're missing shooting off the bench, but you've got good players here. I don't know, but the OG one might sting a little bit more down the line.